Thank you to Scott for coming out. Scott is a longtime DEC employee. You're 30 years at the DEC, working with eagles and golden eagles. He's here to talk about that work. So welcome, the Eagle Guy.
Thanks, Shelby, and I'll try not to turn anybody off. Well, mention I did work for DEC. I retired in 2016. They hired me back for a couple months to do eagle nests in 2017 and 2018, and now I am fully retired. So I decided to write this book called The Eagle Guy, My Career Working with Wild, Bald, and Golden Eagles in New York and the Path I Took to It, a memoir. My talk tonight I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff that isn't in the book too much because I couldn't put a lot of pictures in the book and stuff, so it's a lot easier for me to explain things, in a PowerPoint presentation, and that way maybe you'll buy the book. Okay, hopefully they complement each other, the presentation and the book, and okay, there we go. When I did work for DEC in wildlife, I worked out of the Stanford office in Region 4, which we are in. You can see it's a 9-county region. They're just political boundaries set up by the DEC to break up the DEC's work. But with the Eagles, I worked under the mentorship of Peter Nye, who we'll meet here in a minute in my presentation. And he worked statewide. So he snuck me out of my region quite a bit to work statewide. But my main area of focus was the 9-county region. And if you're geographically challenged, we're in Otsego County right about here right now. I do want to give extra special thanks to two photographers, Lou Busher Jr. and Ralph Spear, who are no longer with us, unfortunately. But some of you may remember in the early 2000s, I gave my very first PowerPoint presentation to DOAS right here in Cooperstown, and we couldn't get the projector to work. So I'm really glad everything's working tonight. But I started, they gave me so many pictures. They just kept emailing all these pictures of eagles they were taking in the wild that I decided to start a presentation. And some of the original photos are what we'll see tonight. This isn't one of them. I copied this one off the internet. Many times people said, I saw a golden eagle. I know it was a golden eagle because it was so huge and it was all dark. And usually it's in the summertime. And that's when the fledgling bald eagles leave the nest. And actually the bald eagles, their first set of feathers is actually 10% larger than the adult feathers. So they can look larger than the adult when they leave the nest. That female on the right, I should say, is an immature bald eagle. And another thing, a way to tell them apart from a golden eagle is the feathers, their tarsus, the leg bone from the knee down to the feet is not covered with feathers. It's naked, where in the golden eagle, as we'll see in a second, covered with feathers. Of course, you're not going to mistake a full adult eagle for a bald. There's another, plagiarize this one off the internet here. You can see that the feathers go right down to the feet. Good, the cursor's showing up. And the golden napier, they have that as soon as they leave the nest, and they have that throughout their life. If you get them on a sunny day, it's like a neon sign. It just shines. And when we were later on, I'll get to the golden eagle project that I did with DOAS. One sunny day, I had a golden eagle fly into view. And I thought it was a bald eagle at first because those golden feathers are just shining so much, it almost looked white. But also on the golden eagle, the head is a little smaller in proportion to the body and the neck a little shorter. So the outline is a little different. If you're been looking at a bunch of eagles, especially bald eagles, and then a golden eagle shows up, you're not going to have a whole lot of trouble distinguishing it from a bald. If you haven't been, sometimes, it's hard to tell them apart a little bit. In the air, if you want to go with Tom here to Franklin Mountain and watch the migrating golden eagles come through, that's an immature golden eagle on the left with distinctive white patches, and that's an immature bald eagle on the right. There is a lot of variation with the bald eagles, so you just can't go by a picture. But with the golden eagles, the outline is a little different too. When you've been seeing a lot of bald eagles fly over and then a golden eagle finally does, the outline is a little different. And in this case, the eagle is looking down, so you can't really compare the head as much, but the head is noticeably smaller in relation to everything else on a bald eagle when it's flying by. And here's another picture of a little bit older golden eagle flying by. And here is a turkey vulture. Most of them have passed on by, but turkey vultures have a wingspan about the same size as a smaller gold or bald eagle, but the wings will be in a dihedral or a V. And they're a very light bird for the wingspan. So if you see them in the breezes, they'll be rocking around a whole lot. Even if there's almost no breeze, they'll be rocking along where the eagles tend to be much more solid and steady when they're gliding. This is the range of the eastern golden eagles. This is each one of these lines was a migration on a transmitted golden eagle. The Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group got transmitters out on a bunch of golden eagles, and DOIS did their part, and they got them out on 8 golden eagles. So some of those are DOIS birds, but it shows the range. They're pretty much concentrated. They spend their summers up in northern Canada. They like wide open country to hunt and everything. They don't, like the forested areas we have here for their summertime hunting. In the wintertime, they come down and they spread throughout the whole Appalachian chain, right on down to Georgia, and right on up through the mountains, right through New York and into New England, pretty much concentrating in the hills, with a few heading off to the west and going over some flat country. Here's another printout from the Northeast Golden Eagle Working Group showing the wintertime concentrations of the golden eagles. And there again, it pretty much coincides with the mountains of the Appalachian chain. But we'll zoom in here on New York, and right down here in the Catskill area, and then again up in the eastern Adirondacks and into New England, there are some concentrations, winter concentrations of the golden eagle. Here's a drone shot I took on our back 40. This is my wife over here, so when I say ours, she actually, her name is the first one on the deed. So you can see when the leaves are off, a golden eagle can fly and see prey in the woods. It's wide open through the trees. This is a hilltop. You really can't tell from the drone shot, but that's a road down there in that valley. So this is actually a hill coming up 100 feet, and that is the west. We are looking to the west. So if you have a westerly breeze, it's going to go blow up that hilltop and up over. And the golden eagles can ride those air currents, the wind as it comes up over the hill. And the whole time they're looking for prey, or they're looking for raven and crow activities. Say if a coyote takes a deer in the woods somewhere, they're generally not going to finish it overnight. And then the crows and ravens are going to find it lickety split. So golden eagle sees crow and raven activity. It's like, there's something to eat over there. And he's going to fly over and check it out. Here's another shot. This is I had a surveyor survey a crooked line on my straight property boundary. So I took this with my drone because I thought I was going to be going to court. But it shows what a golden eagle is going to see flying over the treetops. That's my dog down there, and that's me. But if that happened to be a turkey or a flock of turkeys, boom, dinner. So that's why I threw that in there. I'm not going to tell you the surveyor's name unless you ask me. Here's what our area looks like in the summertime. This is actually right up the east side of Otsego Lake, looking towards Cooperstown. Everybody wave, there we are. But if you're a golden eagle looking for food in the woods, forget it. Because of all the foliage, you're not going to see it. If there's something out in the field, you might get it. But the bottom line is, here's another shot of my property in the fall. Not very good hunting for a golden eagle. They like the open country. We don't have that here in New York State during the warmer months, hardly at all. So we really don't have the habitat that the golden eagles prefer during the warmer months. So basically, we don't have them during the warmer months. So when somebody tells me they see a golden eagle, in July or August or whatever, I never say never about wildlife, but highly unlikely. Like getting to my career and New York State DEC, most of our work was with bald eagles. And we'll start with a little history on the bald eagle in New York. As most of us know, we just about lost them. Um, just didn't have them around. Loss of habitat. I could talk all night about that. I'm not going to, but the land was cleared, the water polluted, nesting trees cut down. Direct persecution. Back in the old day, people lived really close to the land. The only good predator was a dead predator. You know, if bald eagle came in to get your chickens or whatever, bye bye bald eagle. You know, they were just shot indiscriminately sometimes. Disturbance, I'll talk about this a little bit more, especially during nesting and in critical winter times. Human disturbance can cause the nest to fail or even the birds to get run down and succumb to human disturbance. Chemical poisoning, the big one there, which almost everybody knows about, is DDT. Wonderful pesticide as far as pesticides go. It, farmers used it, municipalities used it. It did a great job controlling insects, but it unfortunately with birds' eggs, it caused they weren't able to produce enough calcium for the eggs to be viable. So that pretty much wiped the bald eagle out and a lot of other birds out from New York State. Something had to happen. I saw a bald eagle today just driving home from the store. I see them very frequently without even looking for them. They're back. So what happened? Bald Eagle Act passed by Congress in 1940 made it illegal to shoot eagles. Habitat recovery. Could talk about this all night. All you have to do is look around. The forests are back. One good one I used to like to throw out when I was doing a real long presentation was the New York City reservoirs. They kicked the people off the land, dammed up the rivers, and created these big impoundments. A perfect eagle habitat. Banning of DDT in 1972. If that hadn't happened, I'd be in here talking about the eagles we don't have and I never saw. Endangered Species Act in 1973, passed into law by Richard Nixon, um, made it possible for regulating agencies to protect the eagle's habitat as well. Protect nesting habitat and wintering habitat, real important for the eagle's recovery. But in spite of that, in the mid 1970s, we only had one nesting pair of bald eagles in New York State. The eggs were no longer viable because of DDT. So something had to happen. Enter hacking. Okay, DEC, this was, around about 1975. DEC's figured people in the DEC, okay, we banned DDT, we have eagle habitat back. All we need is some eagles. And with a bicentennial coming up in 1976, a reintroduction effort would have been, it was really popular. They had no trouble getting the funding to do it. So they approached Dr. Tom Cade from Cornell University, who had successfully used the ancient falconry practice of hacking to reintroduce peregrine falcons to the wild. They got together with him, and he had a couple falconers on his staff, and they put their heads together and tailored this hacking process. It's what a falconer would use if he didn't want his birds to be too terribly imprinted on people. He didn't want to raise his birds in his living room. He kept them in a cage out on the landscape to keep them wild. And this was tailored after that. And actually, Cornell took the lead for the first 2 years. And well, I'll tell you about a book about it here in a second. And my mentor, Peter Nye, and a technician like myself who worked with Peter called Mike Allen, who was from this area. This was at Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge, where they put this one tower, and they didn't know if it was going to work. So, it was just a few eagles every year, 23 eaglets, and easy for me to say. 23 eaglets obtained from captive horses and wild Great Lakes nests, mainly from Wisconsin, where there were still some reproducing eagles, were hacked at this location. They would put them, these probably 5 to 8 week old birds, they put them in this cage, which was on the landscape, was overlooking a pool at Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge. And a woman who I'm going to introduce in a minute stayed in this blind here and took notes of every little activity the eagles did for the first 2 years. And she was new at it too, but she instructed Pete and Mike on how it worked, and they took over for the third, fourth, and fifth years at this location. By 1980, it looked like this was going to work. There were eagles on the landscape, and two eaglets from that 1976 hacking attempt formed a nest of their own and successfully reared young in their first attempt, which is really cool. They were just 5 years old, just turned sexually mature, and they reproduced. So it looked like this was a viable method of reintroducing bald eagles to the wild. The captive sources and Wisconsin could no longer supply enough birds, so New York had to turn to Alaska to get enough eaglets to go whole hog. They wanted to really reintroduce birds to the wild, and they needed a lot more birds than just dribs and drabs, 4, 5, 6, 7 a year. They needed a whole bunch. You're talking, a couple dozen, give or take, every year. So they constructed at 3 other locations around the state these big hacking facilities. And here, this was high tech. So somebody didn't have to stay in a blind all day and watch the youngsters. That's actually a video camera. Circa 1980s, that's pretty high tech. But that boat, each one of those yellow crates you can see in that fuzzy picture has an eaglet from Alaska in it. They chartered this boat. These slides are from Pete, by the way. And I wasn't involved with this. I was like 15 years old when it started. Um, so I'm just going by what Pete told me, and he did provide these slides. But they chartered this boat, and they went up the coast of Alaska where there was an eagle nest about every mile. And they had 2 climbing crews that would go off in these boats and climb up to the nest. Initially, their permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Alaska Fish and Game only allowed them to take eaglets from multiple eaglet nests. There'll be 1 to 3 eaglets in a nest normally, but the eagles were so overpopulated up there, there was no such thing as a nest with more than 1 eaglet in it. So they had to get their permit changed to allow them to take single eaglets out of single eaglet nests. Here, this is Pete right here on the right, and a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff member on the left going to climb. Pete would climb the trees, and they had a couple dedicated climbers. Mike would climb a few. There's Mike looking for eaglets and nests. Mike and some of you may know Jim Eckler. He's a longtime DEC employee in Alaska. Banding time, you don't want the birds to get imprinted on people, but they're on the boat for a week, 10 days. They couldn't leave them in the crate all day. And you can see these are leg bands here and banding equipment. So the birds are in the process of getting leg bands. And that's Mike Allen, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but we miss him terribly. He was instrumental in the early introduction of the eaglets. And here, they just have the birds out sunning themselves. You look down here, guys telling his displeasure. And you don't just want to take eaglets from Alaska and put them in New York without a little orientation program. So here they are, a little Genesee beer up in Alaska to get them going. That's Pete and I, my mentor. Really the driving force. Once Cornell handed the program off, he was the driving force behind it. And Mike Allen here was his right-hand man. And Pete taught me everything I knew, kept me going until, he retired in 2010, I believe. And here, because, eagles are so sexy and high profile, this whole program throughout the whole thing hardly cost anything. It was a very cost-effective program, and corporations donated airtime to fly the eaglets to New York. Those big poles that the hacking towers are on, the power companies donated those and the equipment and everything to set them up. So it was actually a government program that cost next to nothing and succeeded. I'm being a little facetious. I actually I signed a book the other day for a guy after he read it. One of the Eagle Nest owners in the region. He said, "Boy, you were awful hard on the DEC in the book." I thought I was just being honest, but if you're familiar with DEC, that's Dr. Ward Stone. He was a famous pathologist who has passed on. And here the birds are. They've arrived in New York. This is at Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge, one of the hacking sites. There's a bird in an eaglet in each one of those crates, being raised up to its new temporary home in New York State. That's Pete, taking the bird up into the tower. Pete again checking the bird over, making sure everything is making it sure it's healthy. And there's a shot from inside looking. There's the video camera. Another look. This is wholesale eagle introduction to New York State. These are the locations around the state. That's the Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge there. That's Montezuma, which just had the that one where the pilot program was. Alcove Reservoir, which is a drinking water supply for the city of Albany, and Follinsby Pond up in the Adirondacks. At the time, it was on private land, not Follinsby Clear Pond. Follinsby Pond, it was on the Whitney Estate. So there was very limited human activity, which is what we needed for these hacking sites. And then the whole idea was when the birds are ready to fledge, they would open up the cage, the birds are free to go. And they were purposely put in areas with lots of natural food. And DEC staff would put food out on the landscape as well. Because in the wild, eagles learn how to feed themselves from their parents. These guys are separated from their parents by thousands of miles. So they had to make sure there was plenty of food on the landscape, and they gradually learned how to feed themselves. By 1988, the goal for this program was to get 12 nesting pairs in New York State. 198 eaglets were hacked at those 4 sites. And in addition to that, 8 eaglets were fostered in that last remaining nest where the eggs are no longer viable. So those adult birds raised 8 eaglets from captive sources. We were so successful in New York that 17, I believe it's 18 states now in the province of Ontario in Canada instituted hacking programs of their own. And by 2010, when we stopped intensively monitoring these nests, there were 192 nesting pairs and 244 eaglets fledged. Now I think DEC is saying they're close to 500 nests now. I'm not in close touch with DEC anymore, so I'm not exactly sure the numbers, but even by 2010, 192 nesting pairs, that's 180 past the goal. Just fantastically successful. There's a map showing some of the states in the province of Ontario that instituted hacking programs. Okay, the same time I published my book, unbeknownst to me, Tina Morris was publishing her book. She actually went through a publisher. She was that woman who, she's a grad student from Cornell who spent 2 summers in the blind with the youngsters at Montezuma there and got Pete and Mike up to speed. And I read the book, I recommend it. And then Flight Pass. It's written by Daryl McGrath. She's an investigative reporter, and she also included the peregrine reintroduction to Cornell University. But she interviewed Mike Allen and Pete and I at length for Flight Pass. Some of you may have already read it. It's been out a while, but I recommend both those books. I'm self-published, so I can recommend books from other publishers. If I was doing a book signing here and I had a publisher, they'd be getting upset with me for promoting other people's books. This is just a graph that Pete did showing the number of occupied nests starting, it was just one for a long time. And then, 88 when they had the 12 nests, and then it just took off. Just boom, and it's still continuing. Okay, we'll switch gears here now and talk about the eagles we have today on the landscape. In the wintertime, our resident birds are joined by a bunch of eagles from Canada. Bald eagles are a fish eagle. They're primarily a fish eater. And in order to eat fish, they need water. Frozen water won't cut it. In Canada, freezes up a lot more than around here. So we have birds coming down to our area where there is open water and spending their winters. One of the first things I got to do is fly around in a helicopter on the Midwinter Eagle Survey, which some of the DOAS folks may have participated in with ground routes. I get to fly around in a helicopter and count eagles. We'd leave the Albany airport, head up to the Mohawk River, follow that down to the Hudson, down the Hudson to Westchester County with a couple side trips, all around some of the reservoirs in Orange and Sullivan County, up the Delaware River to some of the New York City reservoirs, Schoharie Reservoir, Alcove Reservoir, and back to the Albany Airport. It was a full day of flying, counting eagles. Whoops. We were just fly at 250, 300 feet, just barely above the treetops to count the eagles. And if you've ever been in a Huey helicopter, you'll understand why this picture is blurry. But that's an adult eagle there, and that's an adult eagle there being counted. Okay, these are some of the results from the years of the the Southeast survey, which I flew on. And the peaks and valleys aren't changes in population. Um, they were dependent on the conditions when we flew. The important thing is the trend up. Here I am genuflecting over here, and you can't see that on Zoom. So I'll try to use the cursor. I'll explain a little more about that in a second. And that's the statewide results. The important thing is trending up. Because what happens is if it's a good soaring day, if we happen to fly when there's a nice breeze and it's good for the soaring, the eagles will just leave their tree, put their wings out, catch those winds, and glide around for hours on end. And they're actually conserving energy. When they're gliding, they're not burning many calories at all. And it has an advantage. They might find some food while they're doing it. If the soaring conditions are poor, they'll just stay in a tree, sit there all day. The good news is they're usually near water, and that's where our survey routes were. So if the conditions weren't great for soaring, it was great for doing helicopter surveys. We would count a lot more eagles on those days. You don't want to do this during the wintertime. This gentleman, older gentleman, wanted to get a picture of a perched eagle flying. So the younger gentleman is throwing a snowball at it. Well, guess what? There's a license plate right there. Guess what? The top fine for disturbing eagles, $100,000 fine and a year in jail. These guys did get visited by a law enforcement officer. I doubt they got that fine. They probably got $50, but still, you don't want to be disturbing eagles. You can in the wintertime, you can interfere with their ability to survive. B, during nesting, you can cause a nest to fail. You don't want to do it. You don't want to do this. Long story, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I got an email from a woman saying she wanted to get a picture of this eagle that had a raccoon, dead raccoon in the road. And she wanted to get closer. She went home and got a longer lens, and then she walked up close and flushed the eagle off the raccoon. You don't want to disturb them and make them fly just so you can get a good picture. However, if they're eating roadkill and the roadkill's in the road, go ahead and disturb them and get the whatever they're eating off the road so they'll feed on it off the road because they do get hit by cars. But the whole thing I wanted to get across was do not disturb eagles, please. During winter time, the eagles are gregarious, which means they're social. They're not defending a nesting territory, and they all get together. And you have two adults here and two immatures. There's no reason to believe that those are the offspring of those two adults. During the wintertime, the whole population gets mixed up. And they don't just get mixed up in the trees. Here's Lou told me there were some alewives, small fish on the ice, and they were feeding on the alewives. And just because they're gregarious doesn't mean they get along. Here they're having a little skirmish, and it can be an aerial skirmish. Here the immature bird is getting on the adult six, but the adult, being the more experienced flyer, turns the table on the on the immature and wins the dogfight. Just yesterday, a fellow who lives on Canandaigua Lake told me there's 3 immatures around his house that are just squabbling all the time, calling to each other, attacking each other. And, you know, what they're probably doing is honing their chops. You know, they're practicing for when they really have to fight, when they have to defend a nesting territory or there's a real shortage of food. Um, but they're probably just practicing. And here's a good shot of a little skirmish going on. An eagle's vitals are right in the chest. And in order to defend its vitals, its main weapons are the talons. And right in midair, this adult is rolled over on its back to expose its talons to this attacking eagle. And that eagle probably knows by now not to get near those talons. If it doesn't, it might end up a dead eagle. And you know, they are our national bird, but they do have a preference for getting food. Uh, their favorite way to get food is to steal it from another eagle or another bird, another species, and the biologic term for that is called kleptoparasitism. Um, Not kidding. That's a real term. But here the immature has an alewife down on the ice, and the adult wants to get the fish, so it's going to come and take the fish. Here, 2 immatures on you know, on the flight. The one on top has a gizzard shad in its talon, and SO4, which is an Otsego County bird that I banded the spring before this picture was taken, right here in Otsego County, wants that gizzard shad, and it's going to get it. And here we have 2 adults in a foot race to get to a fish, and there's the winner getting an alewife. If all else fails, you got to go hunting for it. I should have said I didn't go through the other 2. It's you know, their favorite way to get food is to steal it. Their second favorite way to get food is to scavenge dead food out there. Its least favorite way is to go hunting for it. This guy Lou told me it was 10 degrees Fahrenheit when he took this series of pictures. And here we have a poor eagle dunking for donuts here. Missed that time. Gonna try again. Boom, has an alewife in its beak. You gotta wonder if it's getting enough calories from that fish to offset what it's losing by going swimming when it's 10 degrees out. But you gotta do what you gotta do. If all else fails, you can sit around and look like a penguin and hope a penguin goes by. Just kidding. During the winter time, if we want to get transmitters on birds at large or band them, um, it's a good time to do it. You know, the birds aren't nesting, so if you're trying to catch them, you're not interfering with their nesting attempts, and they're pretty hungry, so it's easier to get them on bait. But I didn't start my career by catching eagles this way, so we're going to put this aside for a minute. One of my very first eagle duties pretty much were monitoring nests, and that was so we could determine when eggs hatched and when the birds when brooding happened, because we wanted to visit that nest when the youngsters were 3 to 6 weeks old to band them. Initially, it was just pretty much Pete going up the trees to do it. And so my job was to determine what stage the nest was at. And I would start, maybe in February visiting my assigned nests. And maybe I might see the adults at the nest, but they weren't on eggs yet. And then one week we do it once a week. I'd visit each nest. And then I would finally show up and see this. Maybe I just see the top of the white head, just barely see it in the nest. And what I knew was happening was incubation. The nests are pretty much flat on top with grass duff, and the adult eagles will make a depression about the size of a spaghetti bowl, maybe. They'll lay the eggs in that depression, and then they'll seal that off with their breasts. They don't actually put their weight on the eggs. There's a depression that the eggs are in, and they'll keep the eggs warm by sealing off the top of that depression. So they're pretty much lying flat on the nest. And then 35 days, give or take, later, I'll show up at the nest and this is what I'll see. I'll notice the bird is noticeably higher in the nest. And what it's doing is brooding. The adults actually have a naked patch of skin on their breast where no feathers are coming out. Feathers are grown over it, but the youngsters, the hatched youngsters will snuggle right up against the bare skin and under the feathers to keep warm. But that's what's called brooding, but the adult is higher in the nest. And the whole idea was because we didn't want to go to visit that nest too early and climb up because an eaglet cannot maintain its body temperature on its own until it's 3 weeks old. That's when the downy feathers have grown in enough. So it kind of has a down coat. If we visit it too early, the youngsters can either freeze to death or it's a hot sunny day overheat by the amount of time we're there. Or if there's a disturbance on the ground, if you're disturbing the adults and the youngsters aren't able to thermoregulate, uh, they can and will succumb. It has happened in New York State where human disturbance has caused youngsters to die that way. And then furthermore, the youngsters' feet aren't big enough to hold the bands on until they're 3 weeks old. So, and beyond 6 weeks, there's a higher likelihood they're going to jump out of the nest, which isn't the end of the world because their flight feathers are in enough and they'll glide to the ground. But it's a whole lot more rigmarole for us to get them back up into the nest. And if you're trying to visit 5 nests in a day, you don't want to be wasting time chasing youngsters around to get them back in the nest. Um, Unfortunately for us, the eaglets are on top of the nest, not on the bottom, not on the ground. We have to get to the top somehow. How do we do it? We take the stairs. Just kidding. This is actually an early Adirondack fire tower, and you see the guys taking liquid encouragement. I don't know if they've already been up or they still have to go up, but no, just kidding. We take the ladder. Kidding again. For all the nest trees, early on when we were doing this work, we would put roof flashing um, around the tree to create a predator guard to keep raccoons and squirrels and even bears from climbing up the tree to get to the nest. These nests are stinky affairs, and the scavenging wildlife can smell them from a mile downwind, no problem. Um, so, in order to protect the eggs and the youngsters, we put that flashing on, and we would climb the trees with tree spikes on our feet, which isn't great for the tree, but we just didn't have time to mess around doing anything else. So we go up the ladder for the first part of the climb before we started using the spikes because we didn't want to put a lot of holes in the flashing because then the predators could go up. This is Pete here getting ready to go up the tree, and I want to introduce Steve Lawrence. He was a friend of Pete's who worked in a factory up in the Albany area, and he would take vacation time every year to work the ropes for Pete. And eventually, well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. This tree is actually a sycamore, and you really can't climb it with tree spikes. So we brought that ladder in by mistake. We forgot that. For the sycamores, Pete had to climb up, just descend up the rope with ascenders, which he was a rock climber, so he could handle it. But eventually, as the trend in nests, which we saw in the graph, kept getting more and more nests in New York, it got to the point where Pete couldn't get to them all. So for a couple years, he was saying, Scott, when are you going to start climbing? When you start climbing, and wow, really? Can I climb it? I'm afraid of heights. So I was reluctant to start. Finally, Pete, one winter, just called me up and asked me for my waist size. He wasn't getting fresh. He bought this climbing belt for me and some other equipment and said, meet me. This is a nest right on the border of Schoharie and Delaware County. Big white pine, and this is 80 feet up in the air. And Pete climbed up first, sent the safety rope back down. I tied in with Steve on belay, and up the tree I went. And I tell you what, I was scared. Bleep, 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 this. But here I am. Except that the tree was so big, it was really hard to hug. But anyway, there was a road behind the nest, well up the hill and behind the nest tree. And Lou, he had a telephoto lens out to, almost to my nose. He yelled up, "Hey, Scotty, look down." So that's the look of sheer elation because I'm finally at an eagle nest, can't cancel out by sheer terror because I'm 80 feet off the ground. And Pete is literally showing me the ropes. Unfortunately for me, in order to be able to handle the eaglets or whatever, you just have to tie in your equipment and you need both hands free. I wanted to be hugging that tree for everything I was worth. But Pete banded one eaglet to show me how, and I banded the second. It was a two eaglet nest. Steve lowered me down. We sent the rope back up. He lowered Pete down. I was ready to go to the nearest bar. But we drove over here to Otsego County to another nest tree, and I went up solo on belay, but on solo. You could hear my knees knocking all the way up, I think. But I did it, and I banded the youngster, and the whole idea was that first year, I just went out with Pete and Steve to literally learn how to do it and to make sure that I could. Following year, I went out with my own crew. I got my own belay person, who we call a gaboon, by the way. If you get my book, you'll see that term. Doesn't sound like a very flattering term, but if you're the belay person on the ropes, you're a gaboon. This high tech piece of equipment hanging off my belt looks like a coffee can, is a coffee can. It's full of foam. I'm going up. We knew the nest had failed. I'm going up to get unhatched eggs. It's the exact same tree that I climbed the year before, just a year to the day afterwards, with my own crew. Well, with Pete and Steve and later other people are out other parts of the state doing it. This is my gaboon for the first year, Kathy Maloney. Um, Excellent volunteer. Just I can't say enough about her. I give her a lot of credit in the book. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She helped out with my early bald eagle trapping efforts too. And what a great asset to the eagle program she was. And there I am going up the ladder around the flashing, using a ladder for what it was intended for, because I was going to spike in on that tree. That's a white pine, which incidentally, 70% of the nests are in bald eagle nests. Here's Pete going up that sycamore, a lot of work. Pete to this day, he retired and climbed the Matterhorn. This guy did Ironman competitions. He just keeps himself in great shape. But even for Pete, it's a lot of work going up there, but it's all worth it because when you get up there and poke your head over the nest, we we nailed this one with our monitoring. This is a 3-week old eaglet. They don't even know enough to be afraid of us usually at this age. But you can notice the downy feathers in enough so it could thermoregulate. And when they're 3 weeks old, they're really easy to handle and a joy to work with. And they look funny too. This is during the first year climbing, real easy tree for me. I'm about 70 feet off the ground there, but those branches right at the top, perfect for me to tie into and handle the youngsters. But I did have a mishap on this climb. I was all tied in. I had an eaglet in my left hand, and I was reaching to get a tool in my right hand, and it's like I got smacked in the face really hard by something. Didn't take me long to figure out what it was. The world was kind of an opaque white, and I was sweating from the climb, and I could taste what hit me in the face from as soon as they can stand up. The eaglets, the only nest uh, cleaning they do is the biological term is projectile pooping. They will squirt well out of the nest so they don't foul their nest. Well, guess what? My face intercepted that. So not one of my prouder moments. I learned though, they do a little dance before they do that. Um, so I learned to treat every eaglet if it was loaded. And also at a future, unfortunately, Diane was along on this climb. My wife Diane over here was along on that climb, and when I came down all covered with, I went up to give her a kiss, and she ran away. I didn't know she could run that fast. At a ladder nest I was at, Diane wasn't there. I saw an eaglet doing a little dance, and it wasn't facing towards me, so I didn't say anything. And I got Pete and Steve both, so I got my revenge. Here, Lou got this picture. It was another situation where the hill was behind the nest, and wait till you see what he could do with his lenses. That's the eaglet right there over my shoulder. It zoomed right in. And look, that's a 3-week-old eaglet. And look how big the foot is already. Yeah, big enough to hold on the band, but uh, for almost, for certain during the nesting time, you're going to get some wicked thunderstorms through. And those eaglets have to be able to hold on to the nest and not get blown out, so that their feet grow really fast. There's Pete. You can see the tie-in. That's a good shot of the tie-in, but that is a 3-week-old eaglet. Just 3 weeks before that, it was an egg. The egg is the size of a goose egg or so. Uh, you people in Zoom land can't see my hand, but it's probably 2.5, 3 inches. Uh, just a small, well, for a bird, it's a big egg, but not all that big. These birds grow like crazy. They grow super fast. Those birds are about 5 weeks old, 5 to 6 weeks old. There's well, we when they get that big, they usually go to the back of the nest. So we have what's called a chicken hook. It's hard to see in the picture, but there's a wire with a hook on the end, not a fishing hook type thing, just a bow, like a cane hook. Put it around their foot and drag them in. But at that age, I mean that's an older bird there. That's 6, maybe even pushing 7 weeks. And look how the flight feathers are in. If that were to leave the nest, it could glide down, and chances are it wouldn't get injured. And later on, we were putting transmitters on some of these trackers on some of these fledglings. So we would purposely wait till they were this old before we went up. And you can see all kinds of specks. This is an Adirondack nest. Those are actually black flies. Not kidding. Here's one. This is an Otsego County bird here that I climbed up and said, what are you still doing here? You should be out flying around. That's a 10+ old week bird there. Here, this is one of the New York City reservoirs, and you can see the adult flying around up there. After a while, he get tired of flying around while I was at the nest, and he came in to watch me. He did that for the 2 or 3 years I visited this nest. After a while, usually they will just fly around like that previous slide. Um, they never came in and made contact with us, thank goodness. Not always, that wasn't always the case up in Alaska, where maybe the eagles had never seen a person. On occasion, they would make contact with a researcher. And the whole purpose, well, one of the purposes, certainly the purpose for banding was so we could identify these birds. And that's a New York band there. We were assigned blue with a letter V74. So Lou got this picture with his camera. We knew who that bird was just from the camera. That's the federal band. In order to read the federal band, which all birds got, you needed it in hand. Here's a bird flying, V89. We could go to our records and see who V89 is. And that's what bald eagle talons look like. You don't want them sticking in you. Okay, now during the winter time, I mentioned that was the time when we want to capture them. And we use a rocket net for the bald eagles early on. This is a net already deployed. That's an eagle in the net, and that's the bait there. I don't have any pictures of a rocket net going off during the bald eagle work. Whenever we shot at bald eagles, shot a net over bald eagles, we were too busy trying to catch eagles rather than and here's a shot where we caught 81 geese. That's me getting the rocket net ready to go. I'm just showing you this to show the net going off. We caught 81 birds, which, as far as I know, is we never tried to catch 81 eagles on a shot. Unfortunately for me, most of the bald eagle capture work happened down on the Delaware River in Sullivan County, out of my region. So I didn't get involved a whole lot. Sometimes Pete will pull me in as a sub when another Kathy Michelle, couldn't make it. But there's a farm in Bloomville, the Haynes Farm outside of Bloomville, where one of the fisheries guys told me that golden eagles were frequenting this farm. This was 2002, 2003, I believe. So I told Pete about it. I said, Pete, would you like me to try to catch a golden eagle? And he told me yes. And I took some bait down to the farm, put a roadkill deer I got from DOT, put it out, drove the half hour, not even half hour back to Stanford and walked to my desk. And just as I got there, the phone rang. And it was one of the farmers telling me I had a golden eagle on the bait already. And this is right after deer season. So I thought, but this is going to be easy. 12 trap days later, um, in March, finally caught the bird. And I write about it a lot in my book. I'm not going to go into too much. We're kind of running out of time. Can we go over the hour a little bit, or do we have to finish within an hour? Okay, can we go over with Zoom? Okay, try not to go too far over. We are getting close to the end, but I can be long-winded. Um, so anyway, we caught this bird. It was a little male. And when Kathy Michelle, who's also no longer with us, I got to quit giving this presentation because people keep dying who are in it. Um, Sad to say, but she was Pete's technician down in Sullivan County who baited all the bald eagle trapping sites, and she was with me, helped me with the rocket nets and everything when we finally caught one of the golden eagles. But it had an old injury and it was missing all the talons on one foot, except for the hallux talon, which is his rear talon. And that came off in the transport box. And these talons are like kind of if you've ever trimmed a dog or cat's toenail too close, starts bleeding like crazy. Well, lucky Kathy is a wildlife rehabilitator too, and she had that powder, septic powder or whatever, that got the bleeding stopped right away. And we went ahead and processed the bird. But there's a picture showing the blood on the front toes there. That's just from the rear talon bleeding. But if you look at that at the healthy foot, golden eagle talons are bigger than bald eagle talons. They're really formidable weapons. So we went ahead and got the transmitter on it. We're at Cobleskill College. Pete, central office employee in Albany, we only trapped on days where Pete was available to meet me halfway to transmit or a bird if we should be lucky enough to catch one. And there it is. There's beautiful golden feathers. And that's a transmitter on the back. Yes, and that's eagle blood, not mine, I think. Although one of the DOAS birds, which I talk about in the book, I don't think I have it in there. He got me with a talon, and then he just in the finger, and then he bit me. And I'm trying to put a transmitter and do all the other work we had to do on this bird, and I had to keep stopping to stop myself from all the bleeding I was doing by the eagle. But those were the worst injuries I ever got from an eagle. So they're certainly capable of doing a lot more. And just a few days after I caught this bird in March, this is a real cold winter, the weather, it finally broke, and this eagle took advantage of the south winds of the thaw in March. And each one of those stars is a fix. We would only get a reading of where the bird was when the satellite that was communicating with the tracker or the transmitter was overhead. And he just like the first day he was up there in the St. Lawrence Valley, and in a very short order he was up, and we assume he nested right up here. The green is Quebec, the orange is Labrador/Newfoundland. And in the fall we tracked him back. He came right back to the same farm. In the spring we tracked him back up there, and then his transmitter died. But the farmers who were hunters, the following hunting season after the transmitter died, saw a golden eagle with a backpack on it, the transmitter on it. So he survived a good long time, even with the compromised foot. Those talons would never grow back, by the way. Well, after it dies, we would maybe we get more data if the transmitter would die, or that has happened with some of the golden eagles with DOAF that we'll get to in a minute. Um, and I do a lot. I go into a lot more detail in the book. To save time, I'm just brushing over things here. Um, I think this is the winter of 2005, 2006. Pete was launching a study of the eagles of the Upper Delaware, an intensive study to finish off his career with. And some of the Upper Delaware is in Region 4. So he got me up to speed. You have to be federally licensed to do this work. And especially now, as Tom's well aware of, to get me licensed just to do the work for DOAS, I had to go down to West Virginia on my own dime just to click off some boxes. But I had to be trained in everything for catching bald eagles here. So I went out with Pete and Kathy here on, that's the Delaware River over our shoulder there, to get trained. The first day, by 8 o'clock, we caught this bird and three immatures. And you can just see a little brown left in her tail feathers there. So she was just turning 5 years old, just getting mature there. The picture. People always wonder, aren't you afraid they're going to bite you or poke you? But I really think that they know we have their best interest in mind, and they've never tried to do it to us. Sure, Scott. The way I was holding it, if you notice in the previous slide there, I have the tarsuses, the two legs pinned together with my one hand. I can totally control the direction that bird's at as long as I'm keeping those talons away from my body. Can't get me with the talons, and I could keep her away from my face. That's all we really cared about was our face. And well, actually, parts down there where those talons were pretty important too, but I digress. So here I'm learning how to put the transmitters on. That's Kathy Michelle, who's no longer with us, holding the bird. It was very cold that day, so she wanted to stay in the vehicle to keep warm. And I'm learning how Pete's taking the picture. But look at the bird looking at Kathy too. It does have a hood on, so it can't see her. So we do put falconry hoods on the birds, and they do calm down pretty much. And there's one. It's one of the early satellite trackers. Not super early though, because it has solar. The initial trackers didn't have solar. One I put on that golden eagle didn't have solar capabilities, and the batteries would eventually die after 2 or 3 years. The solar units would last 5. We were getting latter ones, maybe even more. Some of the golden eagles here were coming right up to. Tom could speak to that more. Here was the first shot Kathy Maloney and I took. This is down on the East Branch of the Delaware River near Hancock, New York. There's already an adult bird that we caught in the crate there and 2 immatures. There's the adult in the crate. Not looking too happy. You wouldn't be either if your freedom was interrupted by a stay in a little tiny box that was made for eaglets. There's Kathy Maloney holding one of the immature birds we caught that day. That's a female. I can tell that. Well, we know Kathy's a female, but that bird's a female. That honker out there, that's indicative of a female. There is overlap, between some of the male features and female features, but sometimes it's just obvious. And to me, it's obvious that's a female. And that's the mature bird we caught. It turned out it already had a blue banded. This was the first year of the project, and Pete only wanted migrating birds, migrant birds, Canadian birds. And we didn't realize when we caught this bird that it had a blue band on it. So we put a local transmitter, a VHF transmitter on it, and she led us right to her nest. She's a 5-year-old bird. Her nest was in sight of this of the trap site, actually. And I'm sure Kathy was really good at finding nests. She would have found it even if we hadn't transmitted the bird. But also that year, we had a little incident. This bird came in. I go into great detail at it. He kept us busy all day. I talk about it in the book. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we finally set the rocket nets off, and it caused a grass fire, something I hadn't even thought about. Luckily, the wind was blowing away from the bird. Bird didn't get scorched, but the net did. And I own the landowner a new fire extinguisher after this ordeal too. If you want to know more of the details about the grass fire, it's in the book. This is John Brennan. He was a Cobleskill grad like myself, who Pete hired as a seasonal tech just to work on the Upper Delaware study. And here we're checking the bird over. It already has a transmitter on it. There's a good shot with the falconer's hood. which we used on all these birds. Once you get the hood on them, they calm right down. Without the hood, they're freaking out. You know, they're afraid of people, and they can also take a chunk out of you a lot easier if they can see you. Here's an adult I caught during the study looking at me, giving me that dirty look. Well, you want to know why? Because I banded that bird in the nest. That's that same bird, just within a mile of the trap site when it was a youngster getting banded. Here's ECO Bauer. I've kind of lost touch with DEC. I don't know if Vern is still active or if he's retired yet, but he was a falconer. And we in wildlife, we always liked it when Vern wanted to go along, whether we were trapping turkeys or geese or eagles, because he was a lucky charm. He had court in Delhi that day and said, "I'll show up after court." He showed up after court, and 10 minutes later, we shot the net off and caught this immature here. And that should be giving me a dirty look too, because it's one of these youngsters in the nest. This nest is actually in the book I talk about the Yoko Ono nest. That's the Yoko Ono nest. And these are from all our bald eagle work. Each one of these symbols was a different bald eagle, different transmitter. Um, and some of the locations we got with the old technology. With the stuff we're getting to here in a second, for the golden eagle stuff, you can get a lot more hits than this. Fast forward, Pete retired in 2010, I think. So January, February 2010 was the last of the eagle trapping in New York State, or at least in eastern New York State, until Tom Sallow back here called me up. He called me up in the summer. I don't have time to go into all the details, but asked me if I would trap golden eagles for him because they had a camera study going on where they were in conjunction with West Virginia University and the Eastern Golden Eagle Working Group. All throughout the Golden Eagle's wintering range, they're putting out trail cams over bait and documenting golden eagle activity. And PhDs were actually identifying individual golden eagles by their plumage. And they had this study going on, and they thought there was a wind power project, a sensitive wind power project down in Delaware in Broome County, right on the border. The DOAS, Delaware-Otsego Audubon Society, for those who don't know that acronym, were really concerned about its impact on eagles. So they wanted to get some transmitters on golden eagles here locally. So he asked me if I would be willing to trap golden eagles for him. And sure. And I thought it'd be easy. I thought, I'd be able to get permission from DEC right away. Well, it was about Thanksgiving time before I finally got permission. And unbelievable how quickly Tom and DOAS came up with the money to buy these transmitters. They're not cheap. And the capture equipment. They bought just did emergency fundraising and came up with all this money. Just unbelievable how ambitious it was too. And he said, "You want to try to catch 4 golden eagles in one winter?" I thought it was nuts. Well, we caught 3, 3 that winter. And hats off to Tom and DOAS for that. Just unbelievable that they pulled this off. Unbelievable to me anyway. Here is the capture equipment that DOAS purchased. Unfortunately, it was designed by a biologist and not an engineer. And I had to take a lot of test shots to get it operable. But here's what is going off. Okay, it's like a rocket net light, and we learned very quickly that it was a 1 bird unit. With a rocket net, that's 81 geese. But here was the first thing. We had several sites, and my job was to sit in a blind. Sometimes Tom joined me, sometimes other people joined me, other times I was solo, just a pop-up blind in view of the bait, waiting for a golden eagle to come in. The difference between this and the bald eagle trapping, bald eagles, are fish eater, focused on waterways in the valleys. The golden eagles like hilltops. you know, that's where the good soaring wind is. And we saw earlier, right in the first part of the show, they can, you know, get prey and find food up on these hilltops. So we were looking for small clearings on hilltops, which are really hard to find around here, actually. This is our most productive site the first year down near the village of Andes on a hilltop. And I think it was our fourth trap day, maybe our fifth trap day, we finally caught a golden eagle. And we've been trying so hard. This bird showed up even before the sun was up. I just saw a silhouette in a tree, and I knew it was a golden eagle, even though I hadn't seen a golden eagle in you know several years. Just by its silhouette, and the way it was acting, they'll turn their head this way, and well, you can't see this on Zoom, sorry, but you know they'll turn their head almost upside down when they're looking at things, which bald eagles won't do. And I knew just from this, I could only see it silhouetted against the orange sky in the background before the sun came up. I knew it was a golden eagle, and didn't take it long for it to come down on the bait and end up under the net. I took the shot. There I am holding on to it. Tom named this bird Maxine. We didn't, in DEC, we didn't name our birds. DOAS, they named the birds. That's Peg Benedetto. She and her husband were the really driving force behind our most productive sites. And I'd worked with Peg a lot. She volunteered for the DEC a lot too. So I'd known Peg for many years. It's a real pleasure working with both Peg and her husband Michael on this and several other assorted people down there in this site. There's George, the landowner, opening up the crate for me to put the bird in. Here's an Otsego County bird. Tom took this picture. We caught it at probably equal distance between Tom's house and my house. Probably the first bird caught in historical times, first eagle caught by trapping, golden eagle. Okay, this next video, it's pretty long. I'm only gonna show you 30, 40 seconds of it. I have it on a Eagle Guy Facebook page, or you can search, there's a Scott Van Arsdale YouTube site where I have it up if you wanna watch it more. I took it from the blind with my point and shoot. So it's a little herky jerky, but you can hear seeing the eagles, bald eagles, and ravens. You can hear primarily ravens and crows, but if you listen closely, you'll hear some eagles calling as well. And I took this while I was waiting for a golden eagle to come in at our golden eagle site. I wasn't trying to catch bald eagles. That's why I took the camera out, put it on the tripod. This was my view from the blind. That's a sub-adult eagle and an adult bald eagle. There's ravens. If you know what an eagle sounds like, there's an eagle off in the trees. That's an eagle. It was hard for me in this little narrow field of view to know how many eagles were out there, but that day I thought there might have been as many as 25 bald eagles. But that video is a compilation of videos, and it's 3 minutes and 38 seconds long. So if you look for Eagle Guy on Facebook or Scott Van Arsdale on YouTube, you can watch it as many times as you want and turn your sound up. Okay, we caught these during this whole project over several years. I came back after retirement too to catch 1 or 2 birds. We caught 8 golden eagles, one of them twice. Michael was a little concerned about how the transmitter looked in some of the pictures, so that was one dumb eagle allowed me to catch it twice with only like a few hours investment. But they do learn, and I'm glad it was that eagle that he thought the transmitter was messed up on and not some of the others, because we probably never would have caught him again. These are all just pictures from the processing. We were working with PhDs who wanted all kinds of information. So we had to measure everything, take pictures of everything. And I was rusty. This was the first bird I had put a transmitter on in a few years, and it was a new transmitter attachment method. Um, so we had this poor bird in hand for quite a while. And the project leaders gave us a little heck for having so many people around. I thought it was a little overblown. These birds are so, how can you be more stressed out than being caught under a net, being measured and prodded and everything. So what if there's people talking in the background? But we were a little more careful after this um, to make sure it wasn't as a circus going on. Checking the transmitter fit there. This first bird, we got some data for a while and then it disappeared. And Tom and DOAS crew went out looking for the bird, looking for a carcass, and they found a pile of wild boar. That I'm not going to get into the whole story. Long story short, they assumed that that bird succumbed to lead poisoning, which led to DOAS going whole hog trying to educate about the lead issue. And that still goes on today. And I could talk for an hour and a half about the lead issue. I'm not going to, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit here in a second. You can age a golden eagle out to 7 years by the plumage. We knew this one was just, a yearling bird, but we took pictures anyway. I didn't know quite how to do it. I hadn't held enough golden eagles to do that. So we just took pictures for the PhDs to age the eagles with. Measured everything on these birds. Oh, there's Becky in the background. And believe it or not, you can feed them. You interrupt the birds. They're coming in to fill their crops, and we shoot a net over them, and usually let them go with an empty crop. Well, you can try to feed them, and it did work a couple of times. There's Tom holding the bird while I'm trying to feed it with some venison. While all this is going on, I'm back into the eagle trapping business. They had a bald eagle trapping effort out in Western New York for the same reason, because there are proposed wind power projects. And they enlisted Blanche Town here, who's from Region 6, my counterpart in Region 6, and myself. We went out and worked with Region 9. The first day, Blanche and I in the blind trapping, we caught this bald and got a transmitter on it. It was too late to let it go that night, so we let it go the next day. If you look at the date, it was New Year's Eve. In 2014, and Blanche and I got home in time to celebrate New Year's. She got home to the Potsdam area, and I got home to this area. So I got to do some extra trapping. In the meantime, we were training Ann here. This is Ann Rothrock. She's a biologist in Region 9. We got her trained to do this work. And in my region, we got Mike Clark. Well, guess what? Mike Clark is now the wildlife manager of Region 4, and Ann is the wildlife manager in Region 9. They're not field positions. So I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they're trapping eagles now, but I don't know if they've trained anybody else. But back to the golden eagles. So I went out with a bang. This is at the end of my career. And I thought, for 4 years, I thought I'd never trap another eagle. And I'm running around all winter long catching golden eagles here for DOIS and going out to Region 9 to catch bald eagles. It was a really nice ending to my career, not without stress, as I talk about a lot in the book. I'm taking it on the chin there, but that's okay. Okay, these are really nice pictures, but we got to go and making sure the transmitter's on properly. I think Becky took this picture, I think. Those are golden eagle talons there. And don't let my wife see this picture. Oh, too late. This is Peg again. And Peg and I go way back. We're really good friends. And if you think anything's going on there, her husband took the picture. There's her husband, Michael. Darn paparazzi. When we had, it's a big relief when we finally would catch these birds, big relief for everybody. So we enjoyed the moment right before we released them. There's Tom and Peg and me with one of the 8 birds caught during the DOAS project. And then, I said these feathers really glow in the sunshine. Normally, in most lighting conditions, a golden eagle on the ground is going to look really dark, really, really dark with the lighter feathers. But in the sunshine, those feathers glow. My favorite picture throughout this project, Tom had an intern from Hartwick College, Abby Nelson, She took this picture of me releasing the biggest female gene that we caught, and this hangs on my wall. I love that picture, but I wanted to save something for last. I'm going to close out with this, and Tom goes, "When in the heck is he going to talk about this project?" Because of that first bird vaccine with suspected lead poisoning, and I talk about another incident in the book, have a whole chapter on a bird called the saga of B11. I'm not going to go into it. Lead poisoning is a big issue with eagles, especially from high-powered rifle cartridges. They fragment in the meat and in the guts. If you don't know, a hunter who shoots a deer aims for the chest, hopefully gets it in the chest. And in order to have good meat quality and then have an easier drag, one of the first things they do when they get to the dead animal, they remove the entrails and leave it on the landscape. Well, these eagles, being scavengers, you know, they show up, and if they ingest any of that lead, um, a piece the size of a grain of rice is enough to kill an eagle. And it's not healthy for people either. Here's B11. I talk about, that nice picture on the cover of the book. B11 was lead poison. I caught B11 in that swamp with a fishing landing net. It's nasty stuff. And some of the shooting organizations and hunting organizations are spreading misinformation, saying there's not enough science. There's not enough science. It's fake science. It's bogus. Oh crap! I'm telling you right now, it's a real problem. Not just in deer game. This was a woodchuck-sized rodent shot with a high-powered rifle, and all those sparkly things. That's lead. If an eagle happened on this carcass, it would almost certainly be its last meal. It's just saying that a piece of lead smaller than a grain of rice can kill an eagle. Here's a X-ray of a deer that was shot with lead ammunition, showing the entry and exit locations of the bullet, and all those sparklies way out, many, many inches from the wound, are lead fragments. Here's a scan of meat cart. This is from a venison donation program. This radiologist went and collected this meat. Each one of those sparklies is a fragment of lead. Here in New York State, we did the same thing. Pete and I led the charge, and he, Michael, myself, Andy Mason from DOAS went to food pantries, collected some ground venison, replaced it with beef, and gave them a donation. So they were willing to give us a venison. We took it to Cornell. Cornell found 18% of these packages of ground meat from the food pantries had lead in them. Okay, so here you have these disadvantaged people eating the lead, and it can cause all kinds of problems in a fetus and a young child with a developing brain. I can't go into all the problems it causes unless you want to be all night here. We're not going to do that. I'm just telling you, it's a big problem. And here at DEC is leading this charge to have hunters, especially now with the SNAP program being cut and all that. They're really imploring hunters to donate their deer to the venison donation. In Minnesota, all donated venison is run through an X-ray machine, and that's a big step. However, in the Cornell study we did, they found I think it was 8% of the positive packages did not show up on the X-ray machine. So it's just a real problem. It's a little late in this year. I'm trying to get any hunters here to switch to copper. It's a little late. The season opens on Saturday, so unless you're retired, there is through DOAS led the charge for you can get a $60 reimbursement for buying, copper ammunition, which works beautifully. Tom can tell you. Tom's been using it on his Christmas tree farm for many, many years, and he'll tell you it's better than lead for the hunter. And you're not poisoning eagles, and you're not poisoning your children, your unborn children, or yourself. There's no safe amount of lead to ingest. And I can go on and on and on about this. We're not, if you really go to huntingwithNonlead.org. Go to the DOAS, Delaware-Otsego Audubon Society website. They did a really nice video on this topic. Look into it. If you're not convinced, look into it. And don't read The American Hunter or anything for your information on lead. I can tell you, they're like the cigarette companies. 4 out of 5 doctors recommend, Camels for their patients who smoke. Don't do it. So with that, I'll close with the book. Okay, if you're out, I do have some copies here. I'll sign them if you want me to, but you're not going to be able to read my scribble. But you can get them. DOIS has some copies. Jane brings them around to the DOIS events. The Green Toad Bookstore in downtown Oneonta, if you can find a place to park, has them. And Amazon, you can get them. And I do have contact information in the book. If it's the easiest way to contact me. If not, you're going to have to, dig around to find it. I'm always happy to talk eagles and answer questions and stuff. Is there time for me to take a few questions now? Or okay, I'll take questions. Becky? Okay. What we didn't find a lot of, which you will see online, is cat collars and dog collars. That's kind of an urban legend out in the country, a rural legend. We did not find much of that. Pete found, I think, women's panties a couple times. How they got there, I don't know. I mean, teenagers are hard up to find a place to sneak off sometimes, but they're not going to climb 85 feet up into an eagle nest, although some of them will be big enough for that purpose. Almost every nest, even if you're in the middle of forest preserve, nowhere near agricultural land, believe it or not, there would be a stalk of corn, a corn stalk. They decorated with corn stalks. That was almost ubiquitous in all the nests. All kinds of prey items, of course. That was the main thing we were looking for. I wish I had Pete's notes. Pete kept meticulous notes, and I think one time he printed out all the stuff he had found. I didn't find a whole lot. Sometimes a garbage bag, a colorful garbage bag or shopping bag they liked. But they definitely like to decorate their nests. Any other questions here? Anything from Zoom, Susan?
If they have questions, and I'll post all of them for everybody when I post the recording on the DOAS website.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, thanks everybody here in Zoom. Anybody here that rut for deer is on when you're driving home, be very careful. Be watching for deer. Thanks, everybody.